Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale. Where stories comes alive, please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. The wind howled through the cracks in the wooden hut. Grace sat beside her mother, holding her frail, shaking hand. The old oil lamp flickered once, and then died out. The room sank into darkness. Outside, the rain refused to fall even though the sky was grey. Inside, the air was thick with pain and helplessness. Her mother's breathing was shallow, each breath sounding more like a struggle. "Don't sleep, Mama. Please, not yet," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. Her mother opened her eyes slowly. "Grace, I'm tired. But don't stop praying. God will come." Grace nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I will, Mama. I promise." They hadn't eaten in 2 days. The village clinic had shut down. There was no medicine, no doctor, no one to help. Everyone said her mother wouldn't make it to morning. She reached for the last candle on the wooden shelf. It was half broken, dusty, but it still lit. She placed it on the floor and knelt beside it. Her knees hurt, but she didn't care. She closed her eyes and prayed. "God, if you are still there, please. If you see me, if you hear me, help me. I'm not asking for money. I'm not even asking for food. Just, let Mama live. Just once. Show me you are real. Let this candle not burn out until help comes." Her voice cracked. Her tears dropped onto the floor. She stayed on her knees, praying, even as the candle burned lower and lower. In the city of Lagos, the air was filled with noise, cars honking, music playing from open shops, and people shouting over one another. Daniel sat in a luxury cafe, sipping a cold drink. He was well dressed in designer clothes and surrounded by his wealthy friends. "So, Dan," one of them asked, laughing, "when was the last time you saw your village? Or your family?" Daniel rolled his eyes. "Please, don't bring up that village. I left all that behind." "You're serious? You just cut them off like that?" his friend asked. Daniel shrugged. "They were holding me back. I built this life for myself." He laughed, but inside, something stung. For the past week, he had been having the same dream. Grace, his younger sister, standing in the rain, crying. He always woke up sweating, heart pounding. He told himself it meant nothing. But that evening, something strange happened. As he scrolled through social media, a headline caught his eye. "Famine and sickness hit small village in Kogi State. One girl's faith keeps hope alive." Daniel's heart dropped. The photo showed a girl kneeling beside a candle. It was Grace. Older, thinner, but still her. He couldn't move for a moment. Guilt hit him like a wave. He had promised to come back for her. He had told her he would send for her once he made it. But he never did. He had blocked her calls. Ignored her messages. Told himself it was better she learned to survive on her own. Now she looked like she had nothing left. And he had everything. He sat still for a long time, staring at the photo. Then he stood up suddenly. "Where are you going?" his friend asked. Daniel didn't answer. For the first time in 4 years, he was heading home. Pastor Elijah stood barefoot on the prayer mountain, sweat rolling down his face. He had been fasting for 3 days, seeking direction from God. As the wind blew through the trees, he heard a whisper not from outside, but from deep within his spirit. "Go to Grace." He opened his eyes, confused. "Grace?" he asked aloud. "Who is Grace?" But the voice came again, clear and firm this time. "Go to Grace. A miracle is waiting." He didn't know who she was or where to find her. But Pastor Elijah had walked with God long enough to obey without question. That evening, he packed a small bag, took his worn-out Bible, and began the journey. 2 days later, with dust on his feet and hunger in his belly, he arrived at the tiny, forgotten village in Kogi State. The place was dry. Children with sunken eyes and swollen bellies sat under dying trees. Women looked at him like he was a stranger from another world. But one woman pointed him in the direction of a hut. "That's Grace's house," she said. "If you're looking for the girl who won't stop praying even when nothing is working." Pastor Elijah walked to the hut and knocked gently. No one answered. He pushed the door open. There, beside a candle almost burned to the end, was Grace still on her knees, her head on the ground. She didn't even hear him enter. "Grace," he called softly. She looked up, eyes swollen, lips dry. She stared at him in disbelief. "Who are you?" "I am Elijah," he said gently. "God sent me to you." Grace burst into tears. You came?" He walked in and sat beside her. "The Lord hears your cry. Your faith is not ignored." As he touched her shoulder to pray, the candle flame, flickering and weak, suddenly grew brighter. A gust of wind passed through the room, but the candle didn't go out. Grace gasped. Pastor Elijah smiled. "Grace, get ready. Heaven has moved." The next morning, the village was still as usual, quiet and hopeless. Grace walked with Pastor Elijah to the small well where children often gathered, even though water hadn't come up in days. There, sitting on a stone, was a little girl everyone knew but no one truly cared for, Sarah. Sarah was mute. She had never spoken a word in her life. Her parents had died in a bus crash when she was a baby. Villagers said she was cursed. Some refused to even touch her. But Grace had always shared her food with her, even when she barely had any. "Sarah," Grace called, waving. The little girl smiled and ran to her. Pastor Elijah knelt beside her. "Can I pray with you, little one?" Sarah looked at him with wide eyes. As he placed his hand on her head, he began to pray quietly in tongues. Grace closed her eyes, whispering softly, "Let it happen, Lord." Suddenly, Sarah pulled away. Her small mouth opened and a sound came out. "Ma, Ma!" The villagers nearby froze. Sarah's eyes widened. "Mama! Grr!" "Grace!" Grace stared, her mouth open. Sarah began to cry, but she kept talking. "I can talk. I can talk. Grace, I can talk." People began to gather around them, gasping, whispering, some even crying. Did she just speak? Sarah. Speaking. What happened here? Grace dropped to her knees, weeping. She held Sarah tightly. She spoke, she spoke. What God cannot do doesn't exist. Pastor Elijah raised his hands toward the sky. The Lord has remembered this village. He is not deaf to our cry. News spread like wildfire. That night, the small hut where Grace stayed was filled with people. Villagers brought mats, lanterns, and even cooked what little food they had. They didn't come for money. They came for hope. People who hadn't prayed in years joined hands and sang hymns in broken voices. And Sarah, yes, the mute girl, sang louder than them all. Grace looked around at the faces glowing in candlelight and smiled through her tears. "I don't know how he will do it," she said, "but God has started something. I believe with all my heart this is only the beginning." And deep inside her, something whispered. What God cannot do, doesn't exist. Daniel's car screeched to a halt just outside the village. The once familiar footpath looked smaller, poorer, lonelier. He stepped out, dressed in fine clothes, but they suddenly felt wrong here. As he walked in, people stared not because they didn't know him, but because they did. "That's Grace's brother," someone whispered. "He left and never came back. Look at him now, too late, maybe." Daniel ignored their stares and hurried toward the hut. When he saw Grace praying with Pastor Elijah, his steps slowed. She looked thinner, older, but still beautiful, still strong. "Grace," he called. Grace turned. Her eyes widened. She froze. Daniel swallowed hard. "I came. I saw your picture, and..." He couldn't finish. Grace didn't speak. She looked at him for a long time. Then she turned away quietly and continued praying. Daniel stood awkwardly. He had imagined this moment differently. That she would cry and run into his arms. That she would thank him. Instead, silence. He walked away, confused and broken. That night, at the local market, he met an old woman named Rebecca. She was the wealthiest person in the village. Known for her pride, for mocking people who prayed and laughing at pastors. She owned lands, farms, and the village's only store, but her heart was heavy with something hidden. "Your Grace's brother?" she asked with a sly smile. Daniel nodded. "Yes, I am. HMPH. That girl believes too much in prayers. Let me tell you something, faith doesn't fill empty stomachs. Daniel frowned. But didn't you hear? A mute girl spoke yesterday. Something is happening here. Rebecca chuckled bitterly. That Pastor Elijah, he's just another trickster. If God is so real, why hasn't he given me what I want? What do you want? Daniel asked. She looked down. Her hands trembled. I had one child, one beautiful daughter. She went to the city to study. She never came back. Died in a fire. And now, I have everything, but I sleep alone every night. Her voice broke. Daniel didn't know what to say. You want a miracle? Rebecca whispered. Miracles don't happen for people like us. Then she turned and walked away. But Daniel stood still, realizing something. Even the rich can be poor in spirit. Rain had not fallen in the village for over 4 months. Crops had died. Rivers dried. Hunger lived in every home. But that evening, something changed. Grace gathered the villagers. We will pray for rain tonight, she said. God hears us now. He's not finished. Some laughed. Others doubted. Rebecca stood at a distance, arms crossed. You think shouting into the sky will make it open? She asked mockingly. Pastor Elijah stepped forward. Not shouting. Believing. Together, the villagers knelt. Even children joined. They held hands. They sang. Grace lifted her voice. Lord, you fed Elijah with ravens. You brought water from a rock. You can bring rain over this dry land. As the prayer grew louder, the wind picked up. Clouds began to gather. Rebecca scoffed. Just wind. Watch, it'll pass. But then a single drop. Then 2. Then a mighty downpour like the sky had cracked open. Children screamed and danced. Men fell on their knees. Women raised their buckets to the sky, laughing through tears. It wasn't just rain, it was healing, it was life. Rebecca stood frozen. She stretched out her hand into the rain, and wept. Grace walked up to her and gently hugged her. You're not forgotten, she whispered. God still sees you. Rebecca cried harder. How? After all the things I've said? How could he love me still? Because what God cannot do, Grace whispered, doesn't exist. That night, the whole village stayed awake, singing, laughing, crying. They had nothing, yet in that moment, they had everything. Daniel watched from the shadows. He had come to save Grace. But now, he realized she had something he had lost, faith. Daniel couldn't sleep. The sound of rain still echoed in his heart, not just on the roof. He had spent years chasing money, deals, and luxury, but not once had he felt what he felt tonight, peace. The next morning, he sat outside Grace's hut, waiting. Grace came out, surprised to see him. She didn't speak first. I'm sorry, Daniel said, standing slowly. I left you, Grace. I left Mum on her sickbed. I thought city life would change things. I thought if I had more money, more power, I could come back and fix everything. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she kept silent. I failed, Daniel whispered. And now, all I have is guilt. Please, forgive me. Grace finally stepped closer. I prayed you would return, Daniel. Not just to me, but to God. He fell to his knees, weeping. I want him, Daniel cried. Not money, not business. I want the God who speaks through dry winds and brings rain to forgotten places. Pastor Elijah, standing nearby, came forward. He placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. Repeat after me, he said, and Daniel gave his life to Christ, tears falling freely. Grace knelt beside him. They wept together. Around them, villagers gathered, watching in awe. The one who had left had returned, not with wealth, but with a surrendered heart. And that night, Daniel shared his testimony under the open sky. If God can take my pride, he said, and give me this peace, then I believe what God cannot do doesn't exist. 3 days after the rain, joy filled the village. But suddenly, sorrow struck again. A boy named Peter, only 9 years old, fell from a tree and hit his head on a sharp rock. By the time they rushed him to his mother, his eyes were closed. No pulse. No breath. His mother, Ruth, screamed in pain. No, not my only son. Villagers surrounded her, speechless. Pastor Elijah came running, Grace and Daniel behind him. He checked the boy's pulse. Nothing. Ruth collapsed beside her son. God, you gave us rain. You gave us a voice for Sarah. Please, not this one. Please don't take him too. Some villagers began preparing a mat to cover the boy's body. But Grace stopped them. Wait. Everyone froze. Grace turned to Pastor Elijah. Can God still do this? Elijah's eyes filled with tears. Yes, yes, he can. He knelt beside Peter's body. Everyone, stretch your hands, he said. We will pray. Not to impress anyone. Not for show. But because we believe. Ruth clung to her son's hand, sobbing. God, if you're still with us, breathe into him again. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then 20. Many turned away. But Grace kept praying. Then, Peter gasped. A long, loud gasp. His chest rose. His eyes opened. Mummy, he whispered. Ruth screamed. Peter. The village erupted. People fell on their knees, screaming, praising, crying. Even unbelievers couldn't deny it, a dead boy had come back to life. Sarah, the once mute girl, sang loudly through her tears. Musical note, there is nothing you cannot do. Jehovah overdo. Musical note. That night, more people gave their lives to God than ever before. Pastor Elijah looked at the stars. Grace stood beside him, her eyes wet but shining. You said heaven was waiting, she whispered. It has come. And in the boy who rose, the village finally believed what God cannot do, doesn't exist. The miracle of Peter's resurrection spread like wildfire. 3 days later, a black SUV drove into the village, followed by police escorts and flashing lights. Everyone ran to see what was happening. From the car stepped Governor Jonathan Williams, the most powerful man in the state. His face was hard, unreadable. His security detail surrounded him, but he motioned them to stop. He approached Pastor Elijah and Grace. I heard the stories, he said flatly. Rain in a dry land. A mute child speaking. A dead boy rising. I came to see if it's real or just another religious drama. The villagers were quiet. Everyone held their breath. Sarah stepped forward. She looked up at the governor and sang softly with tears in her eyes. Musical note, you are God, from beginning to the end. Musical note. He stared at her. That voice, she was mute. She hadn't spoken in 5 years, Pastor Elijah said. Then little Peter ran out. That's the man from the car, he shouted excitedly. The governor's eyes widened. This is the boy who... Yes, Ruth said, stepping forward, trembling. The governor looked shaken. He turned slowly to Grace. You, he said. What's your name? Grace. You brought this light here? No, she said gently. God did. He was silent for a long time. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees. I was once a pastor's son, he whispered. I stopped believing after my father died and our prayers failed. But now what I've seen here, I can't deny it anymore. Tears rolled down his face. Pray for me. Grace knelt beside him. So did Pastor Elijah. So did Daniel. So did everyone. They prayed not for miracles this time, but for a new heart, a new life. That evening, the governor announced, this village will be transformed. A new school. A health center. Clean water. The world must see what God is doing here. The crowd erupted in praise. Weeks passed. The village was no longer the same. Children went to school. Water flowed from clean taps. Roads were repaired. Electricity reached the huts. But the greatest change wasn't physical, it was spiritual. People now woke up with prayer and slept with songs of thanksgiving. Churches overflowed. Strangers came from far places, searching for hope. One night, as the stars filled the sky, Grace sat outside with Pastor Elijah and Daniel. Do you remember, Grace said softly, how this all started? Pastor Elijah smiled. One girl's prayer. One girl's cry. Daniel nodded. And one woman who never gave up. They were silent for a moment. Then Pastor Elijah said, "Grace, your time here may be over." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You were sent here to break the curse. To rebuild the altar. You've done it." Tears filled her eyes. "But I don't want to leave." "You're not leaving," Daniel said, taking her hand gently. "You're moving forward. Wherever you go, this fire will go with you." The next morning, the village held a Thanksgiving service. Sarah recited a poem she wrote. When the world said it was over, God said it had just begun. When the winds were dry, He sent the rain. When we buried our hope, He raised it from the dead. What God cannot do, doesn't exist. Everyone wept. Then Grace stood to pray one last time. "Father, you took our shame and gave us glory. You took our pain and gave us healing. You took our forgotten village and turned it into a testimony. This is our last prayer, not of request, but of thanks. And may it echo forever." As she said amen, the wind blew gently. The sun broke through the clouds. The church bell rang. And in that moment, heaven seemed closer than ever. The end. Message. There is no lost cause with God. No dry land He cannot water. No dead dream He cannot raise. No broken soul He cannot restore. What God cannot do, doesn't exist. Please don't forget to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It really means a lot to us. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to get more interesting stories like this.